coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect of a new world order. The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests. He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial. How can I convince you when you're even used to hear? You turn your heart away from me each time that I draw near. Your eyes refuse to meet with mine, they glance away in fear.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas. Catch the Free American weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Every time I think about the damage that's been done, the anger wells inside me till I'm almost overcome. I want to tear the moon out of the sky and drop the sun.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American. I'm your host. I am Clay Douglas. And my guest today is supposed to be John Kaminski, but he hasn't answered yet. He's been pretty busy. He's got a new website out. He's got a new website called the Renegade Tribune. He was putting his stories up on an Australian website, and not doing that anymore. Or maybe he is. I don't know. Haven't looked. Haven't seen it. But I was kind of looking forward to sharing his latest article. So, not answering the phone, and I got to tell you, folks, it worries me a bit when somebody who is generally really regular and dependable doesn't show up. Because in the war that we're in, and it is a war, there are people that just don't show up because they've been put in the hospital or killed. I'm glad to see it wasn't you, John Kaminski. I think I've got you.
What's up?
Yeah, how are you, sir? I was just talking about your new website, which is renegadetribune.com.
Yes.
And since you hadn't answered my call this morning, I'm just saying that worries me a little bit, because we really are in a war here, and that's one of the things personally that I wanted to ask you about and talk to you about. You know, I feel like I had a pretty normal existence. I wrote for motorcycle magazines, Easy Rider, among others, motorcycle industry. I was involved with starting businesses and corporations. And then I started publishing the Free American magazine, and it was like almost instantly everything changed. And what I've got up on my website today, and I've reordered my website a little bit, is the what are we facing here? I mean, it's like there's a unseen enemy there that takes pot shots from the bushes. You know, suddenly, I'm trying to sell a book, and everybody in Phoenix thinks I'm selling it to send money to a snitch named Huevos, someone I've never heard of in a place I've never been. What I asked myself, where could that come from? And it always leads back to me starting the militias in the governor's office in New Mexico after what happened at Waco, and suddenly the ADL came after me. Now, just about 2 days ago, I had John Denujian on, and he talked about Leo Frank and why a murderer who the ADL led to the formation of the ADL. So everywhere you look, these strings, these threads just tie together. And I guess what I'm asking here is, are the protocols that I do have on my site now, are they in use on a daily basis in our lives today? It can't.
Absolutely.
It can't be just me being paranoid here. And my lady friend, she's had somebody hack into her computer. You know, I've had other incidents where people have just been attacked for knowing me.
Right. Clayton, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Did you know that we postponed our show from the 20th to the 26th?
We what?
We were going to do a show on the 20th, which is today, but I had to postpone it till the 26th because I got other stuff going on.
I did not know that, but I will move that. I thought I had moved it. I didn't. My apologies. So do you want to reschedule for the 26th and do this in?
Well, I thought we did that already. Yeah, I have to because I have other stuff going on this morning.
Okay, my apologies. It didn't get up on my website, and of course I've had some problems with the website, but I will move you to the 26th, and I will share what you've already written, since I've already started on that. I will share that today. And so I'll just kind of leave you up there and promote your thing, and then I'll bring you up on the 26th. Somehow it just didn't get entered. My apologies, sir.
All right, Clayton.
You have a good day.
I will talk to you. I will talk to you then.
Okay, on the 26th. I have it now.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, let's do that here. Okay, we got John out of the way here. I will take phone calls. I will take phone calls today. and that you can do that. Let me look here at 646 915 8774. 915 8774. Hold on just a moment here, and we will I will get that up. What do we got here? Alright, let me update my website here. Alright, let's talk about John's website, since I did have him scheduled for today. And have we got anybody in the chat room? Okay, we got Papa Bear there from Alaska. Hope it's starting to warm up for you up there. Hope that's a good thing. And John, first article on here, and it's actually in two places. I want to talk about that, and I also want to share what I mentioned. I mentioned something about the protocols of the elders of Zion. Protocol number 6 is, we shall enslave Gentiles. The Goyim will bow down before us, if for no other reason but to get the right to exist. Now, it's important that you understand, when I started the militia, I did that because I sat and watched the government slaughter 17 little children and their families, and I simply could not sit and watch something like that happen on television and not do anything about it. Like you. You were just sitting there, you were watching television. Oh yeah, these are bad people. Oh yeah, David Koresh was a child molester. So you killed 17 little children to save them from a child molester? Didn't make sense to me. So I did two things. I started the Free American, and I started this radio show, and I started the militias. And suddenly the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, who we talked about how it was formed, why it was formed a few days ago with John Denugent. It was formed to get off a rapist that just happened to be Jewish. This was not a race issue. This was a murderer and a rapist that was tried in our courts, sentenced to be hung, and then using political influence, someone tried to give him off. A governor tried to commute his sentence, and the business people and the honest citizens of that Georgia county went out and hung him. They did the right thing. I've told you, let's hang them all after a fair trial. Well, Leo Frank had a fair trial. Now I want to go along with some of these the Zionist, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and a lot of people have talked about this over the centuries. Henry Ford being one of them.
September 11th, World Conquest through World Jewish.
Okay. This is 9/11, World Conquest through World Jewish Government. This is what George Bush talked about. They got a little photo of George Bush here talking about the New World Order. I play that on my show. I play that on my show every morning. You need to hear it.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America.
And I started the militias. And I started the militias as that. In the governor of New Mexico's office, his name was Gary Johnson. We rode together, him on his bicycle, me on my Harley. And I started that after I heard this.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
I'll keep my freedom. I'll keep my guns. Try to keep my money and my religion too.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by. All right, that's not what I want here. That's not what I want. George, come here, George. Say something. Are we not getting this? What's going on here?
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect of a new world order. The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests.
Now, that part was a lie, and I've tried to tell you that I've been labeled a conspiracy theorist, but George Bush makes me pale by comparison. He wants you to believe some Arabs with some box cutters hijacked an airplane and flew it in the World Trade Center, and lighting that candle at the top of those buildings somehow made them fall straight down. Now, if you believe that, and a lot of Americans do, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's brain damage. I don't know if we have finally achieved the dumbing down of America. I don't know. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, I put on my site a long time ago, and then suddenly I was blocked in every library, every major corporation. Hell, I was even blocked in Office Depot. The veterans, I recently got my veterans ID card, and I was blocked in the... Oh, they say, our computers say it's a porno site. We couldn't go there. Hardly a porno site. And I have redone it, and you can see it now. Now, something happened here. Something happened. Something changed. I was in Arizona. I was in New Mexico. I could walk into the governor's office, no problem in New Mexico. Then I went to Arizona, and I referred to 9/11 as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning. It was. Larry Silverstein leased the 9/11, a billionaire, I guess, leased the property, insured it to the hilt, and blew it up. And he told you on national television that he blew it up. Yeah, me and the fire department made the decision to pull building number 7. So I referred to it as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning, and they tried to kill me. My life has never been the same since. I've lost my family. Suddenly, my sons thought I was crazy. My wife's father, who was a assistant secretary of agriculture involved with Billy Saul Estes here in Texas, told her if she came back to me after the accident, he would disown her. She'd lose a few million if she came back to me. And all this is written in my book, Mystery Babylon. But, Clay's selling that book to raise money for a snitch named Huevos. Listen to a little bit of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Mr. Henry Ford, in an interview published in the New York World, February 17, 1921. The only statement I care to make about the protocols is they fit in with what's going on. They are 16 years old, and they have fitted the world situation up to this time, and they fit it now. Who are the elders? 300 men, each of whom knows all the others, govern the fate of the European continent, and they elect their successors from their entourage. These 300 people are all Jews. The administration was always kept secret, even from the Jewish nation itself. Protocol number 1. The best results in governing them are attained by violence and terrorism. The political has nothing in common with the moral. The ruler who is governed by the moral is not a skilled politician, and is therefore unstable on his throne. He who wishes to rule must have recourse to both cunning and make-believe. Our power in the present tottering condition of all forms of power
Why is this
will be
happening
more
here?
invincible
Hang on
than
a
any
minute.
other, because it will remain invisible until the moment when it has gained such strength that no cunning can any longer undermine it. Out of the temporary evil we are now compelled to commit will emerge the good of unshakable rule, which will restore the regular course of machinery of national life brought to a naught by liberalism. The result justifies the means. Let us, however, in our plans, direct our attention not so much to what is good and moral as to what is necessary and useful. For the sake of victory, we must keep to the program of violence and make-believe. Protocol number 2. In the hands of states of today, there is a great force that creates the movement of thought of the people, and that is the press. The Goyim states have not known how to make use of this force, and it has fallen into our hands.
All right. We will try to get that back up. And something that's working better here. Hang on a minute here. All right. The point I was trying to make here, and my apologies here, over the last week or so, they've started in on me. I've had computers hacked, friends' computers hacked. So evidently we were making some progress. I think I had just about got it set up, got my website set up, so I could get it off of the blocking in the libraries. Major corporations. Now, one of the other things that I would like for you to know, when I was living in New Mexico, when the Free American was going well, when I had advertisers on it, when I was traveling all around the country at the preparedness expos, promoting the magazine. I had thousands of subscribers. Thousands of subscribers. I was in the Barnes & Noble bookstores, Books A Million, again, all over the country. Now, they didn't like that, but there was something else that they didn't like. There was something else they didn't like. Not just the militia. The militias had kind of closed down.
September 11th, World Conquest through World Jewish Government, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Mr. Henry Ford, in an interview published in the New York World, February 17, 1921. The only statement I care to make about the protocols is they fit in with what's going on. They are 16 years old and they have fitted the world situation up to this time, and they fit it now. Who are the elders? 300 men, each of whom knows all the others, govern the fate of the European continent, and they elect their successors from their entourage. These 300 people are all Jews. The administration was always kept secret, even from the Jewish nation itself. Protocol number 1. The best results in governing them are attained by violence and terrorism. The political has nothing in common with the moral. The ruler who is governed by the moral is not a skilled politician, and is therefore unstable on his throne. He who wishes to rule must have recourse to both cunning and make-believe. Our power in the present tottering condition of all forms of power will be more invincible than any other, because it will remain invisible until the moment when it has gained such strength that no cunning can any longer undermine it.
Now, what I want you to understand, we're still on protocol number 1 here. But this is a plan of action that they've had in place for perhaps hundreds of years. I stumbled across it. I organized. They feared the militias. They were afraid of them, because here was armed men, again, trained for battle, and they've tried to kill off any of my brothers, veterans, people like me that know how to use a gun, know that are smart enough. I took an oath to the Constitution, folks, but I read it. I read it after I got out, while I was still in, actually. And there was one other thing that was happening here, one other idea that I had. I asked myself, how did we make it 100 years ago? How did we make it when we settled this country? How did we make it when we first came over here? And the answer I came up with was what I call my Liberty Village concept. The Liberty Village concept isn't a way for me to get wealthy, isn't a way for me to make a lot of money. It's a way for us to come together in a central location, and I don't care where that location is, and rebuild step by step the foundation of every civilization, as my friend Richard Kelly Hoskin put. I invited Richard back on my show, but he said, I'm 90 years old, I ain't doing this no more. Well, I'm still young enough to do something, and I'm telling you that the answer is the Liberty Village concept, where we work together, we grow our own food, not this genetically modified shit that's killing us. We put solar on our roofs. That may not be the most efficient thing. Maybe it can get better. Maybe we can make them cheaper. Maybe we can come out with wind generators that are both decorative and efficient. You know, you could make wind generators out of 50-gallon barrels, put on an old axle, and the wind would blow it and turn it, and you would have maybe not what the power that you got now, but you'd at least have power. And if you can organize in your community and your state and show where the fraud is, show where there are millions of dollars that is going into these New World Order coffers every time you turn that light switch on, If you can show your neighbors how they're being ripped off, you heard of nationalizing? We could take, even the state of Texas, in the state of Texas now, in the mainstream news, they're talking about taking our banks back, taking our gold back, setting up a central bank here to bring our gold back, billions of dollars worth of gold. Now, if you keep that out of the hands of the bankers and put it in the hands of the people, you got the answers for this. We can take back the power plants. And nuclear power, you got people protesting nuclear power. There's something called thorium out there that you can produce a nuclear power plant. You can alter a nuclear power plant to run off of thorium. Oh, there's one drawback. Can't make atomic bombs. What do we need? We got thousands of atomic bombs. What the hell for? So we can kill a few more people like we did in Hiroshima, like we did in Nagasaki? I don't think that's right. And that's a little more serious than killing 17 little children and their families, don't you think? This is what I'm talking about. And they say in the protocols, out of temporary evil we are now compelled to commit will emerge the good of an unshakable rule which will restore the regular course of the machinery of national life brought to naught by liberalism. The result justifies the means. Let us, however, in our plans direct our attention not so much as to what is good and moral as to what is necessary and useful for the banksters.
Out of the temporary evil we are now compelled to commit will emerge the good of unshakable rule, which will restore the regular course of machinery of national life brought to a naught by liberalism. The result justifies the means. Let us, however, in our plans direct our attention not so much to what is good and moral as to what is necessary and useful. For the sake of victory, we must keep to the program of violence and make-believe.
Make-believe.
Protocol number 2. In the hands of states of today, there is a great force that creates the movement of thought of the people, and that is the press. The Goyim states have not known how to make use of this force, and it has fallen into our hands. Through the press, we have gained the power to influence while remaining ourselves in the shade. Thanks to the press, we've got the gold in our hands, notwithstanding that we've had to gather it out of the oceans of blood and tears. But it has paid us, though we have sacrificed many of our people. Each victim on our side is worth in the sight of God 1,000 Goyim.
Now, what I have told you is that these people are evil and that they are willing to sacrifice their people if it gains them some ground. And they're admitting this here. Now, there's a next number 7 here. They say and they admit what I've told you over and over again. We support communism. I'll let you hear it from their voices. But the point is, I know this. Why? Because I'm studying it, just like you are now. You're listening to what they say. And I've told you it doesn't matter who wrote the damn thing. It's an evil document. Doesn't matter who wrote it. It matters who is using it today. The banksters are using this. We support communism. Let's hear this.
We support communism. Aristocracy, which enjoyed by law the labor of workers, was interested in seeing the workers were well-fed, healthy, and strong. We are interested in just the opposite, the killing out of the Goyim. Protocol number 4. Gentile masonry blindly serves as a screen for us and our objects. The plan of action of our force and its very abiding place remains for the whole people an unknown mystery. In order to give the Goyim no time to think and take note, their minds must be diverted towards industry and trade. Thus, all nations will be swallowed up in the pursuit of gain, and in the race for it will not take note of their common foe. The lower classes of the Goyim will follow our lead against our rivals for power, the intellectuals of the Goyim. Protocol number 5. Our kingdom will be distinguished by such a despotism of such magnificent proportions as to be at any moment in every place in any position to wipe out any Goyim who oppose us by deed or word. Masses led by lies. For a time, perhaps, we might be successfully dealt with by a coalition of the Goyim of all the world. But from this danger, we are secured by discord existing among them, whose roots are so deeply seated they can never now be plucked up. We have set one against another, the personal and national reckonings of the Goyim, religious and race hatreds, which we have fostered into a huge growth in the course of the past 20 centuries. This is the reason why there is not one state which would anywhere receive support if it were to raise its arm. For every one of them must bear in mind that any agreement against us would be unprofitable to itself. We are too strong. There is no evading our power. The nations cannot come to even an inconsiderable private agreement without our secretly having a hand in it. It is more important to disarm the peoples than to lead them into war. There is nothing more dangerous than personal initiative. If it is genius behind it, such initiative can do more than can be done by millions of people, among whom we have sown discord. Protocol number 6. We shall enslave Gentiles. The Goyim will bow down before us, if for no other reason but to get the right to exist. Protocol number 7. Universal war. We must be in a position to respond to every act of opposition by war with the neighbors of that country which dares to oppose us. But if these neighbors should also venture to stand collectively together against us, then we must offer a resistance by a universal war. We must compel the governments of the Goyim to take action in the direction favored by our widely conceived plan, by what we shall represent as public opinion, secretly promoted by us through the means of that so-called great power, the press, which, with a few exceptions that may be disregarded, is already entirely in our hands. In a word, to sum up our system of keeping the governments of the Goyim in Europe in check, we shall show our strength to one of them by terrorist attempts, and to all if we allow a possibility of a general rising against us. We shall respond with the guns of America, China, or Japan. Protocol number 8. We must arm ourselves with all the weapons which our opponents might employ against us. Everything will be settled by the question of figures. For a time, until there will no longer be any risk in entrusting responsible posts in our state to our brother Jews, we shall put them in the hands of persons whose past and reputation are such that between them and the people lies an abyss. Persons who, in case of disobedience to our instructions, must face criminal charges or disappear. This in order to make them defend our interests to their last gasp. Protocol 9. Jewish superstate. Our super-government dictatorship. The weapons in our hands are limitless ambitions, burning greediness, merciless vengeance, hatreds, and malice. It is from us that all-engulfing terror proceeds, but we will not give them peace until they openly acknowledge our international super-government, and with submissiveness. The money is all in our hands. You may say that the Goyim will rise upon us, arms in hand, if they guess what's going on before the time comes. But in the West, we have against this a maneuver of such appalling terror that the very stoutest hearts quail. Protocol number 10. Our goal, world power. To secure this, we must have everybody vote without distinction of classes and qualifications, in order to establish an absolute majority which cannot be got from the educated propertied classes. In this way, by inculcating all in a sense of self-importance, we shall destroy among the Goyim the importance of the family and its educational value, and remove the possibility of individual minds splitting off. For the mob...
Now, by the way, that is exactly what's being done with running the illegals in here, running the Mexicans in here. That's why they're so scared of Trump. Not to say Trump's the best one over there. He may be controlled by the Jews, who are always behind the scenes. Now, they want to remove the possibility of individual minds splitting off. For the mob handled by us will not let them come to the front, nor even give them a hearing. It is a custom to listen to us only, who pay it for obedience and attention. For this way we shall create a blind, mighty force. This is the people out there, folks.
Handled by us will not let them come to the front, nor even give them a hearing. It is a custom to listen to us only, who pay it for obedience and attention. In this way we shall create a blind, mighty force, which will never be in a position to move in any direction without the guidance of our agents set at its head by the mob, as leaders of the mob. The people will submit to this regime because it will know that upon these leaders will depend its earnings, gratifications, and the receipt of all kinds of benefits. We name the presidents. The Chamber of Deputies will provide for, cover for, will protect, will elect presidents, but we shall take from it the right to propose new or make changes in existing laws. For this right will be given to the responsible president, a puppet in our hands. We shall destroy, abolition of every kind of constitution, and then the time is come to turn every form of government into our despotism.
That is exactly what we've been talking to you about over the last 2 days. How they are using the attorneys, the lawyers, headquartered and controlled out of the British Accredited Registry in the City of London, where these elders have established their banks, their control over you. And as my old friend Carl Kling said, who got destroyed by these people some way, possibly the same way they have tried to destroy me. They've tried to discredit me. They don't want you to listen to me. They certainly don't want you supporting me, because if I had the money of Trump, we would be winning this war. If Trump was really working for us, he would be talking to me, and we would be working together to stop this, because I've been opposing this whole New World Order for well over 20 years. They have tried to marginalize, demoralize, and kill me. I used to wonder about that. Why? Because I've got this Protocols of Elders of Zion up on my website. So that you can't read it in the library. That's why. It's not because it's a porno site. It's because Protocols is on my website. You need to tell people about this. You need to make people understand that I'm not your enemy. I'm your savior. I'm not saying that I'm the ultimate leader here. I'm telling you, I'm a soldier that took an oath to defend the Constitution, and I'm working for you.
The wolves. The Goyim are a flock of sheep, and we are their wolves. And you know what happens when the wolves get a hold of the flock. There is another reason also why they will close their eyes. For we shall keep promising to give them back all the liberties we have taken away, as soon as we have quelled the enemies of peace and tamed all parties. These Goy cattle. God has granted us, his chosen people, the gift of dispersion, and in this, which appears in all eyes to be our weakness, has come forth our strength, which has now brought us to the threshold of sovereignty all over the world. Protocol 12. We control the press. Not a single announcement will reach the public without our control.
There you go. This is why I started to Fear American. This is why this show is uncontrolled. I'm telling you, this is the most feared document, and it's on my website. But you, so you don't call attention to yourself, so you just want to keep your head below the radar, you don't want to send a donation in here, you don't want to help me get by, you don't want to help me make it. Let me tell you, what I told you about over the last 20 years, I told you about the fact that we need to restore hemp, make it legal, make marijuana legal. That stops the whole drug running operation. Oh, but Clay, isn't marijuana a gateway drug? Absolutely. If you got to buy it from a drug dealer. Who's a drug dealer? The CIA and the Mossad. Our DEA. Who gave the guns to the so-called drug dealers? The same people that murdered the children at Waco. The lawyers and the law enforcement and the judges here, and we've showed that over the last 2 days. So here is the one man, not just me. You've heard other men here. You've heard other men. My God. They've controlled it. There's ways we can defeat them. They don't have the insurance they're supposed to have. The money ain't, nobody's asking where the money's going. We've talked about the comprehensive annual financial report. They're stealing trillions of dollars from you. They're putting you in prison. We got more Americans in prison than any other country out there, including China, with 3 times our population. We are a police state. That's the only thing Alex Jones is telling you the truth about. Well, he tells you a little bit of other truth. I heard he had David Duke on his show. I might actually listen to that, because David Duke has been telling you the truth about these Zionists, about these Jews for a lot of years, and of course been demonized. More.
Attacks upon us will also serve another purpose, namely that our subjects will be convinced to the existence of full freedom of speech, and so give our agents on occasion to affirm that all organs which oppose us are empty babblers. Only lies printed. We shall have a sure triumph over our opponents, since they will not have at their disposition organs of the press in which they can give full and final expression to their views. Protocol number 13. Who will ever suspect that all of these peoples were stage managed by us according to a political plan which no one has so much as guessed at in the course of many centuries? Protocol number 14. When we come into our kingdom, it will be undesirable for us that there should exist any other religion than ours. We shall forbid Christ. Protocol number 15. No regard must be paid to the victims who fall. They suffer for the well-being of the future, the attainment of that well-being. Secret societies. Meantime, however, until we come into our kingdom, we shall act in the contrary way. We shall create and multiply Freemasonic lodges in all the countries of the world, absorb into them all who may become or who are prominent in public activity. For these lodges we shall find our principal intelligence office and means of influence. But if there should arise in its midst a plot, then at the head of that plot will be no other than one of our most trusted servants. It is natural that we and no other should lead Masonic activities.
Well, there you go. Now let's hear a little bit from David Icke about this whole thing. I've met David, spoken with him, shared information with him.
Well, as you know, having read the book, Mary, I go into the protocols of the Elders of Zion because it's very, very important. The protocols are claimed to be the minutes or an account of the first Zionist conference, Rothschild Zionist conference in Basel, Switzerland, where I'm speaking from now, not Basel, but Switzerland, in the late 19th century. And let's just say this first of all, because it's very, very important. That first Rothschild Zionist Congress was held in Basel, Switzerland, but it was originally planned to hold it in Munich, Germany. The reason it wasn't held in Munich, Germany, and had to be moved to Switzerland was opposition from Jewish people in Germany who vehemently opposed the plan to ship vast numbers of them out to what was then Palestine. They had to move it because of the opposition. And then what happened is that in 1920, the Times newspaper looked at these in London, looked at these protocols, and they made what was actually quite an obvious connection. I mean, you don't let people tell you what to do and what to read. If you give them a read, and you can get them on Amazon, I think, still, and then just read them dispassionately, and then look at the world as it's been manipulated in the last over 100 years now. And they mirror each other. They mirror each other. So the Times newspaper wrote an article in 1920 saying, hold on a second, have you seen what these protocols said? And have you seen what's happening in the world? What's going on? This is too close. And so something had to be done. So in 1921, obviously under tremendous pressure, the Times newspaper produced a series of articles alleging to discredit right at the present day, people, particularly those of the left in politics, what I call the robot radicals, who just, the heart on the sleeve and do no research whatsoever. They just want to be, posture themselves as pure. I'm pure, I'm anti-racist. Well, actually, I find, I don't know whether you, Mary, I find some of the most racist people are people that claim to be anti-racist because they see race in everything, whereas I don't. I just see consciousness in human bodies of different kinds. But the thing is that they never ask the question, which I did when I was researching this. Okay, well, let's have a look at these articles. What's the background? And it turns out that the articles were written by a British intelligence agent who worked with Lawrence of Arabia, T.E. Lawrence, who manipulated the Palestinian people to fight with the British during the First World War to remove the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Ottoman Empire control of that land, telling them that if they fought with the British and removed the Ottoman Turks in the First World War, they would be given independence and the right to govern themselves after the war. What actually happened was that that land of Israel was already designated for the Rothschilds to take it over. And so after the First World War, instead of giving independence to what we now call the Palestinian people, as promised for their help in removing the Turks and helping the British, the League of Nations gave Palestine to Britain as what they call a British mandate to run, and then that was eclipsed in 1948 when through enormous and horrific terrorism, the Rothschild Zionists took control of Israel, where they've been ever since, and removing more and more of the Palestinian population by the hour. So the articles were written by a British intelligence agent who worked with T.E. Lawrence, who was responsible for lying to the Palestinian people to get them to basically hand over control in the course of events to the Rothschild Zionists. Now, the next question, Maria, is, okay, well, where did he get his information from? Well, bloody well. He got it from Alan Dulles. Alan Dulles of the infamous Dulles family. Alan Dulles was the first civilian head of the CIA after the Second World War. His brother John Foster Dulles was the Secretary of State at the same time. Alan Dulles was implicated in the Kennedy assassination, and Alan Dulles is a front man, like John Foster Dulles was a front man, he's gone now, of course, of the House of Rothschild, who used to sign his letters to German associates before the Second World War, Heil Hitler. And this is the man who provided the information for the British intelligence agent to write the articles for the Times that are now this is how it was, they've been discredited. And where did Dulles get his information from? Well, he got it, he said, from a Russian emigre who was never named and who negotiated a, quote, loan from the Times newspaper on the understanding that it would never be paid back. And so this is the subplot in the background behind the protocols have been discredited in articles in the Times newspaper in 1921. That's what you get. Right. And then when you say, well, hold on a second, just dispassionately look at what they say they're going to do and look at what's happened. They're mirrors of each other. It's staggering. But they're not interested in that, as you know. They're not interested in that. Times newspaper, 1921, that's all they're talking about. And yet those articles were clearly planted because people were asking too many questions and making too many connections between what they said and what was happening in the world.
All right. David Ikes, again, confirming good information out there. Good information coming from you. Let's see. Synagogue of Satan, in their own words. You know, if you can't believe Jesus, well, of course, they want to destroy it. Revelation 2:9, the synagogue of Satan.
These images conceal memories. Beneath Hollywood's familiar stories lies a hidden history of persecution and murder which haunted a small group of men, not American cowboys, but Jewish immigrants. This is the story of the founders of Hollywood, the story of the idea that became their America and ours.
What is America to me?
Modern America first saw light on a Hollywood screen. It was largely the product of 6 movie studios established in the 1920s and run for over 30 years by a group of Jewish immigrants. They had strikingly similar backgrounds.
All of these men who founded Hollywood were born within a 500-mile radius of one another. And all of them wound up roughly within 15 miles of one another in Los Angeles. One could say that the American dream was really born in Eastern Europe.
At the turn of the century, movies reflected the vision of America shared by Thomas Edison and the other men who invented the film industry. Most of these old stock Protestants saw film as an amusement for the working classes. Adolf Zucker believed that to attract the middle class, one had to change not just the theaters, but the films. Bypassing Edison, he imported from France this film, featuring a famous stage actress. He premiered it in a Broadway theater. Not wanting to depend on Europeans for quality films, Carl Laemmle and the other Jewish exhibitors began producing their own films. Edison decided that the Jews had overstepped their bounds. To shut them out in 1908, he organized a producers' trust that declared a monopoly on film production in America. 7 years later, Edison's trust would lose its monopoly in the courts. But in 1912, to escape Edison and the goons he sent to enforce his control of the industry, the future moguls headed west to the orange groves of California. Here they found immediate success.
Now, why did they move to California? I believe that they went there because California was a raw social environment. And although there was a social system in place, it was nowhere near as sophisticated and nowhere near as entrenched as the social hierarchy in Boston or New York or even Chicago, where these moguls came from. So coming to California, they realized that they could create their own social environment. They could create an empire of their own. Not only on screen, but within their own lives and their own social environment. And that's precisely what they did.
And this is kind of the point where William Randolph Hearst steps in. Demonized marijuana, demonized hemp. And so they were able to export the production of hemp to Russia, to China, stole $1 billion crop, and formed the whole political conditioning that it's still being used for. Now, I've been to Hollywood. I've been out there. I've seen how they work. They don't want to talk to me. Why? Because I'm independent. Because I can't be hypnotized. Their psychological programs just simply do not work on me. I made my own films. True Face of FEMA is important, but again, we're not getting the distribution. We don't have the distribution. We don't have the people. You have been so brainwashed out there to believe I'm somehow a bad guy. Oh, he's a biker. Yeah, I ride 2 wheels. Yep, I do that. And the attacks on me that started back on when I exposed Building Number 7, put that on the cover of my magazine, and pointed out the Jewish connection there. The attacks on me have not let up. Only this radio show is going. So you need to, if you want to help, you want to do this. This information is all accurate. I selected personally. Pass it on to your friends. Make a donation. That's all it takes. Then I can continue.
Following Lemley by 1920, Harry Cohen, Zucker, Goldwyn, Fox, and Mayer had set up their own studios, Golden Shtetls, where each was clearly in charge.
These guys were ruthless. They used women. They treated stars brutally sometimes.
Why do I run it? It's like a horse sense, goddammit. Showmanship! And also, I hope who told you this, I am bigger and meaner and louder than any other kike in this town. Did you tell him that, Lou? And I don't mean my dick is bigger than yours. It's not a sexual thing, although you're the writer, you know more about it. Coffee?
Jack Warner was considered a primitive, told terrible jokes.
From beginning to end, the executive had the primary input into the picture and supervised every aspect of production, over and above the fact that beyond any individual picture, it was the executive who created the entire studio apparatus. Every producer who worked there, every director who worked there, every writer who worked there, and every star who worked there was part of the larger system that was created by the Hollywood Jews.
I'm not sure that there was an, quote, American dream before the Jews came to Hollywood and invented it. What you had was a westward movement, and you had the idea of freedom, but you didn't have what we have today, which is a popular culture that creates dreams. That's a dream factory.
They created their own America, an America which is not the real America. It's their own version of the real America. But ultimately, this shadow America becomes so popular and so widely disseminated that its images and its values come to devour the real America. And so the grand irony of all of Hollywood is that Americans come to define themselves by the shadow America that was created by Eastern European Jewish immigrants who weren't admitted to the precincts of the real America.
In the 1920s and 30s, movie houses became temples of the new Hollywood religion. Jewish values made kitsch. 75% of all Americans went to the movies at least once a week.
This kind of movie-going was religious because it had to do with worship. It had to do with the screen being larger than you were, and you being in awe of what you were looking at, and feeling a certain reverence for it. And so there was, maybe you could say, a bogus spirituality, but it was a spirituality still that was believed in.
Actors became the gods and goddesses of the new American religion.
Getting cheerfully mobbed. It's frenzied friendship, frantic fandom. Here she comes, the star.
And where there are new gods, there must be new idols. So the studio heads began a movie guild with the lofty title of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. It was Mayer's brilliant idea to create the Oscars, where the movie moguls could honor themselves by giving each other awards. In this way, they went from being a group of immigrant Jews to award-winning American producers.
The whole notion that Hollywood pins itself on is intermarriage. The whole idea of inter-ethnic romance. Now, why do they do that? First of all, because love is a very democratic ideal. It knows no borders, it knows not riches, it knows not tradition, it knows simply the matters of the heart. In addition to that, when a Jew can marry a non-Jew, particularly part of the establishment culture, that's really a wonderful indication of how far up into society Jews have come.
The Hollywood Jews may have wanted to marry into white America, but when it came to music, Jewish composers looked to black America. Harold Arlen, the son of a liturgical singer, or cantor, became one of the foremost popularizers of the blues.
Jews served as messengers, in essence, of black culture. They took it, they consumed it, they integrated it into their own cultural repertoire, and then introduced it to white America that was essentially willing to listen to Jews and to partake of what Jews had to offer in a way that they never would from blacks.
One of the things that made American films so exportable is that anyone, anywhere could identify with so many of the themes of American movies. One of which was the idea of the outsider, which was a Jewish theme. Jews being outsiders, making films about outsiders. You see this even in monster pictures. I mean, King Kong. There's a film about, an outsider. And yet, it's the monster, if you want to call King Kong that, with whom the audience sympathizes.
Carl Laemmle was an outsider. He resembled an elf. Not surprisingly, Universal's films often championed marginal beings who were persecuted, like the Jews of Europe.
All right. Part 2, Synagogue of Satan. For you dummies out there that can't hear, try turning your volume up. I got no patience with you trolls anymore. Synagogue of Satan, Part 2, in your own words. Talking about Hollywood.
In creating the great movie musical, Hollywood adapted the Broadway musical, an original American art form almost wholly created by fellow immigrant Jews. The music and lyrics were often based on classic stories, reinterpreted from a Jewish perspective.
Almost all of the writing pairs that have come to epitomize Broadway have been Jewish, whether it's Lerner and Loewe and Rodgers and Hammerstein, Jerome Kern. Almost all of them have been Jewish, with the exception, I think, of Cole Porter, really, here. And if you look at their plays, none of them, with the exception of Fiddler on the Roof, are about overtly Jewish themes, but all of them are about overtly Jewish concerns. So take a play like My Fair Lady. That's really about fitting in.
Again.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
I think she's got it. I think she's got it.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
By George, she's got it. By George, she's got it.
Irving Berlin did more than any composer to Americanize Jewish aspirations.
I'm going to murder the bugler. Someday they're going to find him dead.
To understand Berlin is to understand the Hollywood moguls. Another cantor's son, he started life in the midst of pogroms.
My life in bed. Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I love to remain in bed.
Berlin was a Russian immigrant who would go on to write the quintessential American songs. He's a kind of Cyrano de Bergerac. In the foreground is Fred Astaire, the embodiment of American aristocracy, full of grace and upperclassmanship. In the background, the person writing the music and the lyrics is this little Jewish guy. For over 60 years, he tried to reinvent himself. In the process, he infused life into a whole new American ideal. Along with the unofficial anthem of the United States, Irving Berlin wrote the American classics Easter Parade and that most Jewish of Yuletide fantasies, White Christmas.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
Often the first thing to go was the Jewish name. The Hollywood Jews were obsessed with erasing anything Jewish in their films, their lives, and the lives of their stars. Theodosia Goodman became Theda Bara. Sofia Kosso became Sylvia Sidney. Isser Janielovich Dembski became Kirk Douglas. Leo Jacobi became Lee J. Cobb. Shirley Shrift became Shelley Winters. Bernard Schwartz became Tony Curtis. David Kaminski became Danny Kaye. Edward Iskevitz became Eddie Cantor. Melvin Hesselberg became Melvin Douglas. Muni Wiesenfreund, a star of the Yiddish theater, became Paul Muni. Emmanuel Goldenberg became Edward G. Robinson. The G was a reminder of who he really was. Nice Jewish girls, such as Lily Palmer, Julie Holliday, and Lauren Bacall, or Betty Persky, helped to define the American woman. Not all the Jewish talent went to Hollywood to assimilate. There were over 50 non-Hollywood Yiddish films produced in New York before the Second World War.
Trouble, trouble, wird hergebreitet. Da legt das Theater Sachen bei, es hilft kein Wein, kein Geschrei. Trouble hat größer in der Kleine. Jeder dreht sich an den Kuhn.
These films were the flip side of the Hollywood movies. They parodied Hollywood's optimism and Fred Astaire's top hat gentility. Many who could have gone to Hollywood stayed in New York to make films that expressed their Jewish identity.
All right, you know what? I'm a little tired of that. I believe the Synagogue of Satan title was to lure us in and give us this look. So we're going to pass on that. And I want to go over some of what Kaminski had up here. I think that is more important. Patience with me here. Where'd we go? Where'd we lose it here? The War Against Ourselves by John Kaminski. That's what I want to bring up with. Without religion, is disbelief any more of a lie than belief? What keeps you from speaking the truth clearly? Without religion, and remember one of the things that the Jews want to do, what they write about in the protocols, and what is expressed almost daily in the wars and everything, is a war against Christ, a war against religion. Without religion, we remain in a war against ourselves, dissecting reality with a ruthless scalpel, disparaging hope, ridiculing love, and insisting we can handle the burden of life and death all by ourselves, forever dishing the reassuring comfort of a true belief as delusional, manipulative thought control. That kind of struck me here, because my old nickname for the biker community was Loner. I thought I was strong by myself. It wasn't until I married and had a family that I realized that I really needed that. And by the time I really came to grips with needing that, somehow it was gone. Someone took it away from me. Kaminski says, with a religion, we trade truth for comfort and can be certain of our every action without bothering to wonder if it's right or wrong. This allows us to have no second thoughts about the people we put in the ground for the righteous reasons that also happen to be profitable. True believers never have to peek around the corner at that shadow of hypocrisy that our religious leaders tell us is just the cost of doing business within the second realm. So which one is the real lie? Are they both the truth? And will we ever get past the bloody dance of death that both produce? Could humanity's true task of evolution be a third way, in which the smug sadism of holy power and the frustrating discomfort of empirical investigation are transcended and melded in some way into a broader understanding that actually nurtures life rather than the way it is now? The reckless, thoughtless consumption and eradication of living things whose purpose we have never bothered to comprehend? On one side of the coin, you are so convinced you're going to heaven that you can kill all these people who get in your way. Without a second thought. You can kill all those unenlightened pagans without a second thought. The inculcated fantasy of eternal life allows our hallowed leaders to underpin the systems that run the world with barely talked about rituals of raping children and turning churches into banks, even as the general mass of bowed heads remain oblivious to the secret crimes of these sick gooks. That's Kaminski's word for him. On the other side of what passes for the world's epistemological currency are those who believe we can build a better human by discarding all the world's mythologies and disregarding all the freighted rituals we have come to know as our personalities, except that virtually everyone who proposes such weeping changes is a Jew double-talker with more interested in taking control of people's wallets than helping them to live more comfortably. The third side that generally takes control once the political wheels of war get rolling are those unfortunates who are just in it for the money and will kill anyone they're told to if the price is right. There are so many poor people in the world, there's never a shortage of these kinds of troops, so that those with the cash have no trouble keeping the wars going. This is precisely the swamp in which the world's superstitious humans are now mired. Both theories claim to offer a path to existential ecstasy, yet the evidence of centuries shows that each philosophy is a direct route to hell on earth. It's either the Roman Empire or the Soviet Union, and both roads lead to senseless drivel and mass death. And by the way, folks, more Americans have been killed in the last 50 years than were killed in the Soviet Union the 50 years before that. If you add in your medicines, your overdoses, your heart attacks, and much more. Rule 1 of human existence: we're only the sum of people we have met in this lifetime. What we have learned from them becomes who we are. Why is it then, when making our choices, we gather only what we need for ourselves? Is it because we die alone? Is it because we have forgotten that we have been shaped by others? As we abandon everyone in the time of our demise, whether this has been for our own good is our toughest question we will ever have to answer. We don't make things up of our own accord. Ideas are presented to us that shape our lives, and we either accept them and incorporate them into our way of living, or throw them back into the trash along with the other things we find too preposterous to believe. Sometimes, when you least expect it, the seeds of trust you have cast to the wind are returned to you on a mysterious breeze of gratitude that keeps you believing in some kind of cosmic order, as this story from a grateful reader recently did to me. But whether they will stop the annihilation of life on Earth is entirely up for you to decide. Let's see what they got to say. The scales of fear and trust. Somebody said The Prevention of Literature by George Orwell. About a year ago, whoever sent this said, I attended a meeting of the Pen Club, and so an occasion being the century of Milton's Agrippagita, a pamphlet, it may be remembered, in defense of freedom of the press. Milton's famous phrase about the sin of killing a book was printed in the leaflets, advertising the meeting, which had been circulated beforehand. There were 4 speakers on the platform. One of them delivered a speech which did deal with the freedom of the press, but only in relation to India. Another said hesitantly, and in very good terms, that liberty was a good thing. A third delivered an attack on the laws relating to obscenity in literature. The fourth devoted most of his speech to the defense of the Russian purges. Of the speeches from the body of the hall, some reverted to the question of obscenity approved, but political liberty was not mentioned. Out of this concourse of several hundred people, perhaps of half of whom were directly connected with the writing trade, there was not a single one who could point out that freedom of the press, if it means anything at all, means the freedom to criticize and oppose. Significantly, no speaker quoted from the pamphlet which was ostensibly being commemorated, nor was there any mention of various books which should have been killed in England and the United States during the war. And this, in its net effect, the meeting was a demonstration in favor of censorship. There was nothing particularly surprising in this. In our age, the idea of intellectual liberty is under attack from 2 directions. On the one side are its theoretical enemies, the apologists of totalitarianism, and on the other side is immediate practical enemies, monopoly and bureaucracy. Any writer or journalist who wants to retain his integrity finds himself thwarted by the general drift of society rather than by active persecution. The sort of things that are working against him are the concentration of the press in the hands of a few rich men, the grip of monopoly on radio and films, the unwillingness of the public to spend money on books, making it necessary for nearly every writer to earn part of his living by hack work, the encroachment of official bodies like the MOI and the British Council, which help the writer to keep alive, but also to waste his time and dictate his opinions, and the continuous war atmosphere of the past 10 years, whose distorting effects no one has been able to escape. Everything in our age conspires to turn the writer and every other kind of artist as well into a minor official working on themes handed down from above and never telling what seems to him the whole of the truth. But in the struggling against his fate, he gets no help from his side. That is, there's no large body of opinion that will assure him that he's in the right. In the past, at any rate, throughout the Protestant century, the idea of rebellion and the idea of intellectual integrity were mixed up a heretic, political, moral, religious, atheist was one who refused to outrage his own conscience. His outlook was summed up by the words of a revivalist hymn: dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone, dare to have a purpose firm, dare to make it known. Well, you know, that is exactly what I have tried to do. I've tried to tell you the truth. I told you the truth about Waco, no child molester. I told you the truth about the World Trade Center. I've told you the truth there, and I have paid for it. But I haven't quit. There is still hope in me that somehow you will realize that I'm not a hater. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not a racist. I'm not even anti-government. I want the government we were promised. I've researched it. The people I've had on my show has researched it. And if I had your backing and that of your neighbor, I believe we can put together a plan for Liberty Villages to generate a little bit of power. It gets better if we unite. That's, again, that's one of the things that I just advocated on my show. I just advertised that of AmericansStandingUnited.com. I've had Carl Swinston, I've had Jim Porter on. You can hear the shows. You can hear the shows. Yesterday, day before yesterday. And if we use this for a vehicle, and you got out and talked to your neighbors and said, let's work together on this. GMO foods are a bad thing. You agree? Here's the documentation on it. We can produce our own food. I would just put something up on Facebook of window gardens. We really can do this. Yeah, it's a little bit of hassle. Yeah, it's a lot easier to go get the shopping cart and go to the store. But there are ways to do this. There are ways to turn this around, to make it work for us. Why can't we do this? Too lazy? I don't know the answer to that. Too much effort? Don't trust me? I'm not. Yeah, I take that back. I am looking for some money. I'm looking for you to spend $5 or $10, get some of my books. Mystery Babylon is a good one to read because it shows you how they're bringing the drugs in the country and then putting your people in jail for it. It's a good one. It's something you should be reading. David, you keep hopping in and out. Okay. To bring this hymn up to date, one would have to add a don't at the beginning of each line. Don't, for it is the peculiarity of our age that the rebels against the existing order, at any rate, the most numerous and characteristic of them, are often rebelling against the idea of individual liberty. Daring to stand alone is ideologically criminal as well as practically dangerous. The independence of the writer and the artist is eaten away by vague economic forces, and by the time it is undetermined by those who should be its defenders, undermined by those who should be its defenders, it is the second process that I am concerned here. Freedom of thought, the press, are generally attacked by elements which are not worth bothering about. Anyone who has experience in it, of lecturing and debating knows them off backwards. Here I'm not trying to deal with the familiar claim that freedom is an illusion, or that the claim there is more freedom in totalitarian countries than in democratic ones, but with the much more tenable and dangerous proposition that freedom is undesirable and that intellectual honesty is a form of antisocial selfishness. Although other aspects of the question are usually in the foreground, the controversy of freedom of speech and press is at the bottom, a controversy of the desirability or otherwise of telling lies. What is really at issue, the time to report contemporary events truthfully, or as truthfully as is consistent with the ignorance, bias, and self-deception from which every observer necessarily suffers. In this, I may be saying that straightforward reportage is the only branch of literature that matters, but I'll try to show later that every literary level, probably in every one of the arts, the same issue arises in more or less subsidized forms. Meanwhile, it is necessary to step away from the relevancy in which this controversy is usually wrapped. The enemies of intellectual liberty always try to present their case as a plea for discipline versus individualism. The issue, truth versus untruth, is as far as possible kept in the background. Although the point of emphasis may vary, the writer who refuses his opinions is always branded as a mere egoist. He is accused, that is, of either wanting to shut himself up in an ivory tower or make an exhibitionist display of his own personality, or of resisting the inevitable current of history in an attempt to cling to unjustified privilege. The Catholic and the Communist are alike in assuming that an opponent cannot be both honest and intelligent. Each of them tactically claim that the truth has already been revealed, and that the heretic, if he's not simply a fool, is secretly aware of the truth and merely insists it out of selfish motives. In communist literature, the attack upon individual intellectual liberty is usually masked by an oratory of petty homogeneous individualism, the illusions of the 19th century liberalism, etc., and are backed up by words of abuse such as romantic, sentimental, which, since they do not have any agreed meaning, are difficult to answer. In this way, the controversy is maneuvered away from the real issue. One can accept, most enlightened people would accept the communist thesis that pure freedom will only exist in a classless society, and that one is most nearly free when one is working to bring such a society about. But slipped in with this is the quite unfounded claim that the Communist Party in itself, aiming at the establishment of a classless society, and that the USSR, that aim is actually on its way to being realized. If the first claim is allowed to entail the second, then there's almost no assault on common sense and common decency that cannot be justified. But imagine meanwhile, the real point has been dodged. Freedom of the intellect means the freedom to report what one has seen, heard, and felt, and not be obliged to fabricate imaginary facts and feelings. The familiar tirades against escapism and individualism and romanticism and so forth are merely forensic device, the aim of which is to make the perversion of history seem respectable. 15 years ago, they say in this article, when one defended the freedom of the intellect, one had to defend it against conservatives, against Catholics, and to some extent, for they were not of great importance in England, against fascists. Today, one has to defend it against communists and fellow travelers. One ought not to exaggerate the direct influence of the small English Communist Party, but there can be no question that the poisonous effects of the Russian mythos of the English intellectual life, because it is known facts, are suppressed and distorted to such an extent to make it doubtful as whether a true history of our times can ever be written. Let me give you just one instance out of the hundreds which could be cited. When Germany collapsed, it was found that a very large numbers of Soviet Russians, mostly, no doubt, from non-political motives, had changed sides and were fighting for the Germans. Also, a small but negligible portion of the Russian prisoners and displaced persons refused to go back to the USSR, and some of them, at least, were repatriated against their will. These facts, known to many journalists on the spot, went almost unmentioned in the British press, while at the same time Russophile publicists in England continued to justify the purges and deportations of 1936-1938 by claiming that the USSR had no quislings. The fog of lies and misinformation that surrounds such subjects as the Ukraine family, the famine, the Spanish Civil War, the Russian policy in Poland. Russians themselves would not want him to be, does not have to acquiesce to the deliberate falsification on important issues. I have before me, the writer says, what might be a very rare pamphlet written by Maxim Leninov in 1918 and outlining the recent events in the Russian Revolution. It makes no mention of Stalin, but gives high praise to Trotsky and also to Zinoviev, Kamenev, and others. What would be the attitude of even the most intellectually scrupulous communist towards such a pamphlet? At best, the obscurantist attitude of saying that it is undesirable document better suppressed, and for some reason, if it were decided to issue a garbled version of the pamphlet denigrating Trotsky and inserting references to Stalin, no communist who remained faithful to his party could protest. Forgeries almost as gross as this have been transmitted in recent years, but the significant thing is not that they happen, but even when they are known about, they provoke no reaction from the left-wing intelligentsia as a whole. The argument to tell the truth would be inopportune, would play him into the hands of somebody or other who is felt to be unanswerable, and a few people that are bothered by the prospect of this, which they condone getting out of newspapers and into the history books. The organized line practiced by totalitarian state is not, as is sometimes claimed, a temporary expedient of the nature as military deception. It is something integral to totalitarianism, something that would still continue even if concentration camps and secret police forces had ceased to exist. Now we're talking about some intellectuals here that are talking about the strife between communism, between Germany, between fascism, and we are the product. We are reading the lies from each party. It's like, read what the Democrats say, read what the Republicans say, and somewhere out there, see if you can find anything from the libertarians. And people like me, we're declared radicals. We're declared anti-government. We're declared anti-Semitic. Telling the truth about what the Russians did, what Stalin did, what the Bolsheviks did, does not make you anti-Semitic. We should learn from these things. This is why, and I tell you in my thing, this is why I try to warn you. I don't want to see this happen. You talk about FEMA camps. Are they there? I think they are. I think they built them. We've got the documentation to show that Brown and Root built them. What do? Just wait to be put in there, or do we start talking about it? Do we start talking about this to our neighbors? Or do we wait until your neighbors are hauled off? This is really where we are at. We don't want this to happen. And yet, we don't want to accept it. We don't want to accept that it could happen. George Orwell didn't he spoke up. He said any writer sympathetic to a political cause does have to acquiesce in the deliberate falsification of important issues. That's where we're at now. Trump is Donald Trump, and again, not saying he's the perfect one, but he's better than anything else you got out there. Better than anything else you got out there. Walter Duraney, who won a Pulitzer Prize for never mentioning 9 million Ukrainians were starved to death by the insane Jews who ran the Soviet Union in the 1930s. Orwell was talking about communists. But you know the drill today. You can't get published anywhere in the mainstream press unless you're willing to sign on to the Muslim 9/11 lie. Practically every writer you read today in any venue has forfeited his own integrity simply by espousing one political creed or another. This would also be true of religious writers, as religions are a form of totalitarianism. As Orwell writes, totalitarianism demands, in fact, the continuous alteration of the past, and in the long run probably demands a disbelief in the very existence of objective truth, which is why today you not only don't get the truth about current events from anybody in the mainstream, as well as those who are in the alternative media, but you don't get any real history either, as the fabricated narratives about the phony wars, 9/11, the world wars, and why America does what it does are all skewed by those communicating within the polluted narrative of reality. Orwell elaborated on the impact of this. Even a single taboo can have an all-around crippling effect upon the mind, because there's always the danger that any thought which is freely allowed may lead up to the forbidden thought. It follows that the atmosphere of totalitarianism is deadly to any kind of prose writer, though a poet, at any rate a lyric poet, might possibly find it breathable. In any totalitarian story that survives for more than a couple of generations, it is probable that prose literature of the kind that has existed during the past 400 years must actually come to an end, which is how Snowden got himself caught up in that lie of political correctness around 9/11, trying to impact the mainstream with his false narrative, revealed that he's part of that falsehood. Despite not possessing the complete picture, Orwell managed to transcend the false narrative. He observed political writing in our time consists almost entirely of prefabricated phases bolted together like the pieces of a child's mechano set. It is an unavoidable result of self-censorship. And by the way, mechano set is what the English call an erector set, a child's construction toy. To write in plain, vigorous language, one has to think fearlessly, and if one thinks fearlessly, one cannot be politically orthodox, which is why Kaminski insists that the only one force runs the whole world. The U.S., Russia, China, India, Britain, and Germany are all run by the same Jewish power structure, and we gave you an insight into that with the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is up on freeamerican.com. These wars are only fabricated, confabulated fantasies, contrived passion plays with real actors designed to make money from the sale of weapons. Orwell also wrote, totalitarianism, however, does not so much promise an age of faith as an age of schizophrenia. A society becomes totalitarian when its structure becomes flagrantly artificial, that is, when its ruling class has lost its function but succeeds in clinging to power by force or fraud. Such a society, no matter how long it persists, can never afford to become either tolerant or intellectually stable. It can never permit either the truthful recording of facts or the emotional sincerity that literary creation demands. And that's the history of what we have today. Phony New York Times dictating reality to puppets of Jewish bankers while the rest of the social climbing world hangs onto their every word even as their lives are being destroyed. Back to Orwell, when one sees highly educated men looking on indifferently at oppression or persecution, one wonders which to despise more, their cynicism or their short-sightedness. My favorite line from this Orwell essay is, imagination will not breed in captivity, which is why you have the lame 9/11 narrative, which never made sense in the minds of people who can actually think, and you have to wonder how pathetic the American thought process has become when consensuous reality has managed to install so many lies into the fictional narrative of American history in the 21st century. What we do know for certain is that an outside force has taken control of our society, our lives, lathered up our brains with the additions that shorten our lifespans and sicken our hearts because we've lost the belief or had it ripped from our hands that life is a delight, both a pleasure and a privilege. Instead, it has been turned into an unbearable ordeal of fear and betrayal by those shadowy figures whose nasty perversions control us through compulsions and prejudices and wring all the joy out of life for the vast majority people of the world. And you know, folks, that's kind of the way I feel right now. I had it for a while before I became aware, before I became a danger to him, before I found out what kind of men these were, if you want to call them men. Maybe they're demons, maybe they're Neanderthals, I don't know. Still searching for answers. Everybody's got an opinion. I don't know. I don't want to believe that everybody of a certain race or a certain color is evil, because I just don't think it's true. Don't think it's true. Kaminski does. But as we go on day by day, his theory and his insights are a little bit more rooted in truth and fact, and I start looking like a dreamer, wanting things to be different, wanting things to be different, wishing that I still had a family, wishing I still had friends, wishing that everything that I cared about hadn't been taken from me. And it's actually more than that. Driver's license, everything, my ability to travel, everything has been removed. Whether it was, and this is a point that really bothers me, whether it was the government, whether it was the CIA, whether it was the FBI, whether it was the ADL, somebody took everything I cared about from me, my businesses, my magazines, my ability to travel, and they've taken my family. They've taken my ability to make an income. I still do the show because I believe everything that I'm telling you is valuable. I'm believing you can learn. The people I'm bringing to your attention are people that you need to know, possibly work with. How do we do that? What do we do? And the only thing I can say, I can stick my ceramic cup out and say, make a donation. Make a donation. Go to freeamerican.com, click on the donate button. Donate what you can afford. I'm not asking you to put yourself out. I know what a 12-pack of beer costs. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I devote my time to doing the show, to trying to get more information out. And I still believe that the Liberty Village concept, which I'll be working on this week, if we grow our own food, no matter where you are, you can, I just put up on my Facebook, you can do a hanging garden in your kitchen, in your living room. You can grow some of your own food. Put a little air bubble thing instead of your, maybe you want the fish tank. You can grow your own fish. There are ways that we can combat this, and if we work together in a small community, I don't want to live in a big city no more, but if you live in a big city, work on your block, work in your apartment building. Start putting flyers together down at the corner. Start talking to people. Start getting things out. And I'm probably just as guilty as you. I haven't been doing that. I'm going to try to change it. I've gotten my office set up now. I've got some help. We're still under attack. Just took me all morning to get off some porno leak off of my site, Facebook, that was sent to me. Take them off of my friends list, whatever it is, wherever it came from, and my lady has found had the same things happen to her. And she's even had people knock on her door saying, "Oh, do you know Clay Douglas?" Now, this is a certain amount of opposition, but we can handle it if we've got a little bit of support for you. George Orwell says it would be a fairly simple matter to suddenly wake up and realize that we've been deceived by falsehoods, entrained by addictions, polluted by poisons, chained to our prejudices, which would serve no purpose except for the money that's wrung out of them, that fattens only the very rich so they can leave the rest of the world dying of a thirst for common sense and for the compassion that our parents taught us. Kaminski actually said that's why the Jews are trying to eliminate the family, because the family is the only group we can be sure actually loves us. Whether you believe it or not is something you can argue about tomorrow, as long as your family sticks together. But once it comes apart, the argument's over and your world will never be the same. That's where I am now. It's what I am trying to deal with. The family's not there anymore. They've gone about it. They've gone about their own business. And maybe I'm just being paid back. My mother lived in a little apartment alone without me while I was miles away. Maybe I'm getting paid back for that. God bless you. Check out freeamerican.com. Thanks for listening.